The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So I'm the guy who gets your electrical subcontracting change order requests and has to turn them into my clients. So I'm going to give you a little perspective on that today from both sides of the aisle. From the owner's perspective, I've been a construction manager, owner's representative on many projects representing the owner where we hired a contractor, a general contractor, and I've also been a subcontractor or general hiring electrical contractors, so hundreds and hundreds of times. I've probably done 500 or 700 projects over the years. But today, my main business is helping contractors. I have about 50 clients. I help a lot of electrical contractors. Several are members of IEC, and I was just with a couple of them last week in Denver, and working with them on building their business plan, improving their margins, etc. So today we're going to talk about change orders. Change orders, and change orders are all part of moving your company to a stronger level. And I'm going to give you some tips on, from my perspective as a GC, what's it take to get them approved and make sure you maximize them and really get them signed and paid for, right? That's what it's all about. All right, so contracts. Let's talk about contracts. That's kind of a funny word. Contracts is the first part of contracting. It's actually the longest word in the word contracting. And most of the subcontractors I've used over the year, I've probably signed 5,000, 10,000 subcontracts. Most subcontractors will sign anything if I put it in front of them. They're so horny for work. They just want the job. But they don't really read the contract. And if you manage the contract, you'll really be proactive in your change order documentation and collection. So, the question is, have you ever signed a contract you didn't read? Did you ever get burned by a clause you didn't read? So many contractors, subcontractors, sign contracts, accept responsibility they don't really read or understand. So, they're in the yes business. They're too trusting. They don't want to upset the apple cart. They don't want to upset their GC customers or their builder customers, developers, whoever you're working for. But I break it down simply to contracting is about contracts. It's about managing them, implementing them, documenting them. And if you don't understand what you're supposed to do, then it's really hard to make money as a contractor. So what we're going to talk about is how to get your prices approved and how to make a clear understanding of how you're going to work together out on the job site and from a project manager's perspective, so you can get your change orders approved, and how you can create a clear understanding and a working relationship with your customer. And so I've written in several books over the years. My latest book is Get Your Construction Business to Always Make a Profit. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book called General Contracts and Subcontracts, What to Know Before Signing. So we're going to focus today on change orders, right? Okay, so here's the goal of all contracts. We're sitting around the table. I'd now like to shift all responsibility onto someone else. So most contracts, the goal is what? Shift responsibility. You're supposed to know this. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to accept all responsibility. And what we really want to do is make sure that your client, your customer, really knows who's responsible. So this is what I call the contract liability flowchart. So we have an owner developer, that really is the customer, the main project owner, whoever it is. Could be a home builder, could be a industrial park developer, could be a manufacturing company, it could be a general contractor. Whoever your customer is the owner developer, it's customer. And then we have a general contractor and subcontractors working for the general contractor. Above the owner developer is the architect and or engineering team, which, electrical engineering, mechanical, plumbing, all the other things, and consultants and sales engineers, etc. So the goal of all contracts is to basically isolate the owner of the project So in their goal and their contract, their general contract between the owner and the contract and the owner and the architect generally tries to transfer liability away from them to up or down the chain. And so what happens is the owner tries to transfer all the responsibility to the general contractor, who then tries to transfer all the responsibility to the subcontractor. And sometimes the subcontractors are really at a disadvantage because, you know, it's take it or leave it, right? So you don't really have a choice. So the key is you have to understand the contract. You have to read it, you have to know what it means, and you've got to talk to your customer about it when you start the job. So there's a real clear understanding of, you know, do we do work without a signature? Do we do work on a verbal? Who's authorized? How do we get paid for this stuff, etc. So, and then, you know, kind of an aside, you definitely need a good construction attorney. So a must-do is, you know, win some, lose some, right? Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe, you've all heard the jokes. But we've got to have somebody review our subcontracts, our contracts at least once a year. You got to have a quick review. The laws change. Pay when paid, pay if paid, never paid if paid, and all the other crazy clauses that are in there. What are you willing to sign? What are you willing to not sign? So the first thing is we got to understand the contract. And so the goal is then is to what? Cover our butt. Make sure we, you know, everything. We don't get, you know, stuck doing some work and not getting paid for it, right? So we want to cover your, you know, whatever you want to call it. So anyway, what's it all about? So why changes occur? Let's just do a little quick overview and we'll get into tactics. So why do they occur? Well, there's several reasons. The owner changes their mind. They upgrade, they change the light fixtures, they upgrade the light fixtures, they upgrade the switch gear, whatever it might be. So the owner wants to upgrade, change, add, delete something. So that's a pretty obvious change order requirement. I mean, it's pretty obvious. You want to add something, you're going to pay for it, right? Well, backing up to the contract, let's remember that you only have a contract to install what's in the contract and on the plans. That's it. You don't have, there's no variable, you have no opportunity to add or delete. The only person who can add or delete is the owner of the property or the project or the developer. Number two, why? Value engineering. You know, a lot of times they'll ask you to change something, give them a better price, design, build a part of it to save money. So that is a way to create a change. I mean, when you do that, though, we got to document it. Number three, the plans and specifications aren't complete. You know, there's unforeseen conditions that weren't on the plan. There's errors, omissions, some other things. Architects, engineers don't approve your requests, your submittals, your shop drawings fast enough for you to meet the schedule. You know, hey, the guy walks out there and says, hey, do you mind if could you add a few new plugs, a couple more plugs? Sure, no problem. So what, you know, the owner now thinks it's free, right? And then you bill them, and then they're all upset because you didn't tell them. So, but basically, it's back to the contract. What does the contract say? Put it in writing, send them a proposal, get it signed, then do it, right? So plans aren't perfect. You didn't design the plans. You don't accept responsibility for the plans unless you do design build. So we got to make sure it's real clear who's accountable for the plans. Whoever hired the electrical engineer is accountable for the plans, and make sure they're correct and per code. And then errors, slow approvals, all those kinds of things. Differing conditions. You were supposed to be able to do something and there was an underground structure, or, you know, the power company changed their mind and moved the transformer, et cetera, right? So were they anticipated? Were they clear on the drawings? Should you have known? You know, we get into some gray areas along those lines. And then delays. So things that slow you down, things that cost you money because there's delays, and then, you know, delays lead to weather, et cetera, et cetera. So we've got design errors, changes, decisions, you know, it slows it down. Weather, strikes, shortages, can't find, you know, the light fixtures. I know LEDs were starting to really come in last year and we couldn't get lights, and et cetera, et cetera. And then, you know, they want you to hurry up, they want you to slow down. So, you know, generally you're one of the first contractors on the job doing the underground and you're the last one to finish. So, you know, there's 100 reasons why your customer slowed you down. They always want you to cram more workers at the end of the job, right? Right? Yeah. So what kind of changes are there? So there's requested changes, and the owner has the right to request changes, and the GC has the right to request changes, and you really don't have a choice. You have to do them per the terms of the contract. So we'll cover that in a minute. And so there's constructive changes. So these are things that the plans are messed up, the owner should have done something he didn't. There's change conditions, there's errors, incomplete plans, plans and specs, conflicts, problems. There's more work than in the documents, or there's things that they say you should have known, but there's no way you could have known. When you bid a job, you're not required to go out there with a soils engineer and see what's underground. You're not required to go out to an existing building and test the amperage. If the electrical engineer told you it was 400 and you get there and it's 200, right? And number 3 are cardinal changes. Those are just major changes, and we basically cancel the original contract and start over. So so if we understand there's basically 3 kinds of changes, and number 1's easy. It's number 2 is the one you get in all the arguments. The owner doesn't want to accept any responsibility, and they want you to accept it all, right? And then under differing conditions, we've got latent physical, which means you should have known things are different than the contract. You were supposed to have this and it wasn't there. Like I said, it was supposed to be a 400 amp and it's a 200 amp, right? It calls for sandy soil and it's rock. All those kinds of things. Demo calls for drywall and it turns out to be lath and plaster. So, and then there's unknown or unusual. So during the bid process, what reasonableness is important to understand. A reasonable general contractor should have probably visited the site, reviewed the plans, reviewed the documents, knows what it requires, but you're not required to hire an engineer. And then upon discovery of a problem, what's the contract say? Notify, document, and of course we have to mitigate damages. If you bust a water line open, you can't wait for a signature. You're by contract required to mitigate damages and fix that water pipe that's broken, or fix that underground power main from the power company, which shut down the whole street, etc. And then submit the claim per the contract. So that's pretty basic stuff. So what's a change order? How do you like that picture? What's a change order? Change order is simply a written amendment to the contract. So first of all, we have a contract, and then it's written. If it's not written, you don't have anything. You don't have an agreement. You don't have understanding. If it's not in writing, it never happened. So it's a mutual consent between the parties, and all parties must sign. Has to be binding. They send you a change order. Doesn't mean you have to do it unless you agree to do it. They can tell you your work's improper, and then you can protest or whatever. But there's nobody has a right to tell you what to do without a signature. And so you must agree. They can't just issue you a back charge unless you agree. So that's just illegal. You can't do it. But who's going to sue over that, right? But we all get stuck with back charges. And then it has to be clear as to the terms. The scope, the price, the schedule, the terms, and anyone can propose. The owner, the general contractor, the subcontractor, the architect. Doesn't mean they have to approve it, but then we have to get approval. The architect can tell you what to do, or the engineer, but they don't have any authority. The bonding company, the bank, the tenant in a building can, the superintendent for the GC can tell you what to do. You don't have to do it if it's changing your scope of work without a written agreement. So as long as we understand, what I'm accountable to do is only what's in the contract. And that leads us to we have to get approvals in writing. And so, I pulled this right out of a general contract and a subcontract. We got consensus docs, we got AIA, we got ASA, ABC. There's a bunch of them, but they all pretty much say the same thing. Extra work, change orders, or claims which have not been executed as written change orders by Joe, Sam, or Dave will not be approved or authorized for payment, nor shall become a part of your contract. So what does that mean? You know, it's right in the contract. If you go out there and do a bunch of work and they're not authorized or approved in writing by Joe or Sam or Dave, whoever it says in the contract is the approved authorized signer, they're not going to be authorized for payment. I mean, it's real clear. I get subcontractors all the time walk in my office 3 months after the job and hand me a bunch of, you know, change order tickets that, hey, well, Joe told me to do this. Well, you know, Joe's not authorized. You have no right to collect money unless it's been authorized. And so you got to be really careful. You've got, and this is a gray area. This is always an, you know, well, who in your company is authorized to approve free work? Who in your company is authorized to tell your crew to go forward without a signature? You know, we want, well, you know, we trust these guys. Well, yeah, you trust them until they don't pay you, and then you hate them, right? And then you blame it on your customer. Well, in reality, you're not following the rules. So how do we fix that? And then it'll say things like, do not perform any additional extra work without a properly executed change order agreement signed by whoever, right? It's right in the contract usually. Who's authorized? The vice president, the project manager, almost never the superintendent. And then my subcontracts, and most have this clause, field superintendents and foremen, meaning that your customer, general contractor or builder, are not authorized to give verbal or written approvals for any extra work or change order, including daily work tickets or written proposals. So when you ask them to sign a work ticket, a daily T&M ticket, they're saying, yeah, they work, but they have no authority to get you paid for that work. But so there's a, you know, you're at risk. You're at risk without a written approval. So how do we solve these problems? I mean, the contract really is firm and tough. I've been an expert witness in several cases where subcontractor, general contractors are in dispute over change orders, and it's purely at the mercy of the judge. I've had many times where the judge awards the payment to the subcontractor without a signature, and I've had many times I've sat there and couldn't believe it, and the judge did not award the subcontractor any money because they didn't get anything in writing. So you never know. You're at risk. You are really at risk. So when you give away freebies or you do work without a signature, you are 100% at risk of never getting paid. I got to tell you, as a GC, I had a tenant improvement project manager working for me for years, and he was kind of sloppy on his paperwork and really didn't approve anything with the subs. He just told them to do it, and you know, we paid him, and then he quit, or I fired him. I can't remember. And I go through his desk, and you know, there was like 30 unsigned change order requests from subcontractors in his desk, and they all came in my office and asked me for the money. I said, I don't know if you even did it or not. How do I know? It's just a request for money. And so I said, I can't pay you. First of all, we never got any money from our customer for these changes, and I'm not a bank. I can't pay you. There's nothing in writing. And so I got accused of being a jerk. What else is new? And it's only because the subcontractors didn't follow the contract, and they trusted, you know, my guy Barry to just approve anything, you know. So you got to be careful. All right. So we start a job. Everybody's happy. We sign the contract. We go out there and do a ground baking, you know, have a cocktail or a beer or whatever, or a Coke, and we got a perfect contract. We got a great lump sum guaranteed not to exceed price, and then we get into what? We get into reality. So we have written and oral change orders. Well, it's either written or to be a change order. There's no oral. Verbal, you're going to lose. So people have short memories. I always say owners, architects, engineers, general contractors, and subcontractors have short memories. And guess what? They're convenient in their favor. So if it's not in writing, it never happened. That's just my rule. No, if it's not in writing, it never happened. I mean, you just got to put that right on, plastered on your door in your office. If it's not in writing, it never happened. So we got to follow the contract. Always transfer the oral, verbal directives into writing. You got to always, you know, you hereby authorize this. Please agree. Number two, you know, you got to have a separate letter request agreement. You got to ask for it, and it must be in writing and binding to win. I mean, if you want to win in court, right? And number four, it's got to have two signatures, two-party agreement. It's not a, hey, Joe told me. That's, who cares? That's, how do I know it's true? Fake news, right? Fake news. And Meeting minutes don't count in court. You know, they go, yeah, but he didn't agree. He just, you know, we document that you told us to do this. Well, it's not in writing. It was just a meeting minute, so you can't go by that. So if you have a subcontractor meeting on the job and the superintendent tells you to do a bunch of stuff, doesn't mean you do it unless it's in writing. And you know, you might be able to win via, the judge might say, well, standard practices, okay, you know, they told you to do it. Yeah, you told them to do it. Yeah, okay, well, I'll give you some of the money. But it's very risky. So I'm trying to eliminate risk here, and we'll get to a simple way to solve that problem in a second. So we want to, another thing we want to worry about is who's authorized. Who's authorized? You know, to me, the only guy who can write a check is the owner or the general contractor. General contractor needs you to do something, get it in writing, and they got money. Whether they get paid for it or not, it doesn't matter. You can still sue them for the money. The owner is the only, you know, the owner and the general contractor are the only people who can tell the subcontractor to do things. They're the only one who actually write checks. Architects don't write checks. Testing agencies, soils engineers, electrical engineers, none of them write checks. And then I've been an owner's rep or a construction manager. They may or may not have authority. I've had contracts both ways. I've had some where I have authority to authorize up to 5,000, 10,000, some number without getting approval. But I have other ones, they say, no, I'm the you have no authority. You just recommend, and then I decide. So I've literally walked off job as an owner's rep where the owner wasn't being fair with the subcontractors and just voided all the change order requests, even though the owner told them to move forward verbally. So got to be careful. Who has authority? You know, a general contractor. I know in my company, in most companies, I have about 20 clients that are general contractors. The only person is the project manager or the vice president can approve extra work. The superintendent can't. The project field foreman can't. The only person who can approve money is the project manager or the vice president. And architects, engineers, consultants, they can tell your work's not per spec, but they can't force you to change it because they're not your customer. You don't have a contract with them. So they can, but they can issue incidental changes, you know, dimensional things, small things, move the light 3 feet, center it on the beam, whatever. But there's no money or time. If you think there's money or time, you got to get it in writing. And because they're not authorized to spend money. I don't know of many architects who have ever written a check for anything ever. They don't even have checks, right? So what are we doing here? We're trying to figure out how to move forward. So here's a typical, our client contracted with us and subcontracted with them, who hired the other company who had us do the work. So nobody wants to take responsibility, right? All right, so let's look at the claim clause, snooze you lose, right? And I don't know the clause on your contract, but for a subcontractor, there's a clause that says claims relating to the constructor, general contractor, builder, customer, whatever it might be, right? And these are pretty standard clauses. The subcontractor should give the constructor or the builder or the GC written notice of all claims within 7 days of the subcontractor's knowledge of the facts giving rise for the event which the claim is made. So basically, you have a period of time generally that you have to provide documentation with the written notice. So it's sometimes it's prior, sometimes it's 7, sometimes it's 14 days. So you have to know what's in your subcontract or contract, and they're all different. It depends who issued it. Thereafter, you then have to submit written documentation, including supporting documents, within so many days after giving notice. So first of all, you give notice, and then sometimes you have to give notice and the price or the request. You know, there's not 2 steps. So you got to read your contract within 14 days after giving notice, unless you agree. So it's 7 days, 14 days, 21 days. And then it says the builder, your GC, your constructor client, shall respond in writing denying or approving the claim no later than X days, 7 days, 14 days, after receipt of subcontractor's documentation of claim. Subcontractors, read this is important. Subcontractors' failure to respond shall be deemed as a denial of the claim. So if they don't respond, it's not open, it's closed. So you just got to really make sure you understand these clauses that you're agreeing to before you move forward with these contracts. Now, I don't care if it's money, time, move something, change something, it doesn't matter. It's all the same. There's a clause for all this in the contract. So as we move forward, we have our change order logs and our, proposed or interim directed or proposed change order, PCO. Everybody calls them different things. The new consensus docs calls them IDCs, interim directed change. The AIA contract, the ASA, call it a PCO. So whatever you can call it. So we got to keep track. We got to have a log, and then we have to, what's approved, what's not approved, right? Which is the executed. So you got proposed and then executed. So we want to keep logs on that. All right, so let's get into practicality here. Let's give you some tips and ideas of how to improve your situation here. You all know what I've said so far. Don't do work without a signature. We all know that, but we all do it every day. So how do we avoid customers from not paying this, right? That's really why we're talking. So change order. And how you like that? Think we need to get a change order, fix that, or the contractor should have known, right? That's pretty dumb. So anyway, so rule number one. Quit dumping money down the drain. Quit doing work for free. Stop giving your money away. If you had $100 or $1,000 for every work item you did without a signed change order, where you risked it all on the trust with the customer, how much money would that add up to? How many hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So why is it so hard to get a change order in writing? Well, it just depends. A project manager, it's a lot of paperwork for a general contractor, and then they have to go talk to the owner. They don't really want to face reality. They don't want to go talk to a customer. They don't want to tell them something's screwed up. They want to avoid pain. They want to avoid conflict. There's a lot of reasons why you don't get your change orders approved quickly. It takes a lot of paperwork. It's got to go up the ladder and down the ladder. 6 people have to sign it, and the bank has to approve it. So there's a million reasons that the PM avoids you like a plague for the GC, and then so then me as a subcontractor, well, just give it to them, right? It's easier. I don't want to create conflict. So who decides if it's free in your company? The foreman, the project manager, the superintendent, the VP? I mean, when I work with companies, we create and write job descriptions for each person on the team, and we put right in the job description, the foreman has no authority to give things away for free. If they are going to do things for free, they have to get approval from, project manager, vice president, owner of the company, the president, etc. So think about who in your company makes the decision whether it's free or not. And I think I'd want to have someone in senior management make that decision based on the customer relationship and the complexity of the challenge or the change, right? So everybody knows it's supposed to be written, but what do you think the GC's superintendent's goal is? His goal is to get you to do it for free. That's his goal. What do you think the project manager's goal is? To get you to do it for free. Why? He don't want to deal with it. He don't want to go talk to his customer and beg for more money. He just doesn't want to deal with it. Or he should have had it in his contract and he doesn't. He doesn't want to pay for it, right? Now, if it's a legit ad that we're going to upgrade the light fixtures, well, the customer wants that. But the unforeseens, nobody wants. Nobody wants to deal with it, right? So you got to understand, what's the motivation here? It's not to screw you. It's to avoid pain. They don't want to run it up the chain. They don't want to go conflict with their customer, etc. So, and then the question is, how do we get paid? When do we get paid? Is it even worth doing? And then they're going to probably squeeze you down to a 15% markup, and your overhead's probably 15, and probably trying to get another 5 or 10 on top of that. So basically, you're doing change orders for free, right? So what do? We want to understand the rules. So do we submit a price, low price, high price, freebie price? What is it, right? What's the best way to present change order requests? So rules for rich contractors. Number one, they're not extras. I mean, you didn't draw bad plans. You didn't write a bad contract. You didn't assume things should have been included that weren't included. Otherwise, you would have never gotten the job with your price, right? So you bid it per plans and specs, no more, no less. That's it. So first of all, we got to make sure it's clear to your customer that they understand you've only got what's in the contract. You don't have any more, any less. And if they ask you to do more, or the plans aren't complete, it's not your problem. You didn't design the electrical package. Not a design build is totally different, right? So they're additions, changes, or deletions from the contract scope of work. So somebody changed the contract scope of work. The contract scope of work isn't complete. The plans aren't complete. They're not perfect. They've got holes in them. There's no way you could have known. You need to get more money for what's not in your contract. So you're only hired to build what you've been hired for. So errors, unforeseen, plans and specs coordination issues, the thermostat conduit's not on the E drawings, it's on the M drawings. I mean, you don't have to put that in. It's not in your contract. Your scope is the E drawings, right? Scheduled delays, they stopped and started you, they squished you at the end. You didn't assume that. You've got 10 guys in your bid for 10 weeks. They can't squish you to 20 at the end where you're gonna lose productivity. Act of God, it starts raining and, you know, whatever, scheduling challenges, errors and omissions, project acceleration, things that basically these are things beyond your control. So it's the owner's responsibility to have perfect plans. And most owners don't want to deal with that. They don't even want to think about that. But the owner hired the architect and the engineers generally, and then they are responsible for perfect plans. If the plans aren't perfect, you know, it's not your problem. The architect doesn't want to face reality here, right? Or didn't spend enough money to get it right. So part two of that is never give it away. You know, if you're hired on price, you're providing the minimum per plans and specs. You didn't pad your bid to include freebies or unanticipated errors in the drawings. So no free work. I just have a rule, no free work unless there's a trade-off of some sort. GC asks you to hook up the temp power. Well, that's not free. You know, that costs money. That costs your crew. They ask you to move from one floor to the next because the drywall guy didn't show up. Well, that's causing you money. It costs you money. So I call it the loose change rule. Nickels and dimes add up to a lot of money. I mean, at the end of the year, how much money are you making? 1 to 5%? There's not a lot of extra in your bid, in your budget, in your annual P&L. There's not a lot of money. You make 5%. You had a great year as an electrical contractor. Net profit pre-tax, and you pay taxes. You know, half of that goes to the government, and you buy a few pieces of equipment and give some bonuses. There's not much left. So how do you include all these freebies? You don't. You got to be, you know, they want you to work overtime. They got to pay it, right? Markup is justified on change orders as well. You're not in business to break even. You're in business to get a return on investment. You've got tools, equipment, project managers, people. You need to get a return on that investment and things like that. All right. So number 3, you got to be firm but fair. Don't overcharge. Don't tell them a 2x4 light's $800. You know, now they think you're a crook. Be firm. Follow the contract, but be fair and follow the contract, right? So handshakes don't count. Freebies, you know, that's just dumb to me. So never do extra work without a clear understanding. How am I going to get paid? Prior notice. How many days do you have to approve my shop drawings? And if they force you to proceed, you proceed under protest, right? How many weeks does electrical engineer have to approve the light fixtures or the switchgear? When are we going to get paid? And number 5, get it in writing or do it for free, right? So if it's not in writing, you're doing it for free. Just got to assume that. And always include money and time. Even if it's one plug, it costs you 10 minutes. It screwed up your crew. Your PM was running over here. Your crew had to move to do an extra work over here. You know, it doesn't mean you have to ask for money for it, but you should put it in your contract, time, and then obviously if it costs you money, you need to ask for money. But you know, they ask you to do $5,000 change order. It takes time. You know, $5,000, a third of it's electrical labor. You know, that's $1,500 at even $100 an hour. That's 15 hours, right? So I mean, it's not. It costs 15 more hours. So we need to get more time, and maybe got 3 guys out there. So that's 5 days, right? 5 days for that $5,000 change order. We need to ask for money. And number 6, don't be a wimp. Don't be too wimpy to ask for change orders. I mean, if you're too wimpy, get out of the business. You shouldn't be in this business. You should just go work at a donut shop, and you know, they give you money, you give them a donut, right? But this is a tough business. It's hard to make money. It's hard to make a lot of money. And you got to be firm but fair, and you can't be a wimp, right? And so when we start a job, we need to have a clear understanding of the schedule and obviously the contract terms. But the schedule, we got to know what the schedule is. A lot of GCs will, you know, won't send you the schedule. You got to know the schedule, and then you got to tell them what you included in your bid for crew size, timeline, etc., so they can't cram you at the end of the jobs. So when we start a job, we've got to create a milestone or a term chart. We've got to make sure we clearly understand what the start date is, the completion date, calendar days, working days. You know, the GC's probably got weather days in their calendar. What's the completion date required? What's the difference between approved, final, substantial? You know, a lot of contracts, general contracts will have that all laid out. What are the scheduling milestones? What are some deadlines? You've got some shop drawings that take 6 to 12 weeks to get the materials after approval. You need to know what those are and clearly communicate. You need to know what the liquidated damages are, if there's a bonus if you finish early. You got to know the markup allowed by contract, any other contract terms. So you've got to be, you know, you're running blind if you don't stop and find out this thing before we start the job. So you as a subcontractor, you demand this stuff from your customer, or you clearly understand it before you sign the contract, because you don't want to commit to something you don't know. So when we start the job, before we sign a contract, we've got to have a milestone or term chart filled out and understood, so we can balance the risk and see if it's worth signing the contract. And then you obviously move forward and operate under the terms of the contract versus a pure guess. Another thing you want to have thought through is, you know, maybe some other thing. I call this my admin checklist: the bonding requirements, billing requirements, invoice deadlines, lien releases, joint checks, discounts, who authorized to sign, what notice and documentation is required, what shop drawings are required and submittals, what licenses and tests are required, insurance, additional insurance, cash flow, change order procedure, required meetings. I mean, the list goes on, right? There's about 20 things you need to know to manage this contract. Safety meeting requirements, permits required, closeout. What are they going to want you to do at closeout? You know, they tell you as-built. Well, what does that mean? Is it on a floppy drive, a hard drive, a download to a website, or just print some blueprints, right? And what about warranty? What are you guaranteeing? I don't know what's in the contract. You need to ask them, because you're at risk for all these milestone items and contract terms here. So to avoid change orders or problems, I need to know this before I agree. And then I agree, and then we manage per the contract. So, you know, notice is an important thing. What requires notice? You know, we went through those clauses. Claims for time, you got it within 7 days, 3 days. Changes in scope or specs, substitutions, value engineering, how much time do they have? You know, what if there's a plan problem, error, a conflict, differing conditions, you know, emergencies out there? What do I have to do to make sure I get paid on a change order? I need to cover all of this before I start work. Delays, acceleration, weather, late approval, you know, they respond slowly. They don't pay on time. What are you going to do? And what about back? Do they have the right to back charge at the end of the job because you didn't? No, they say nobody cleaned up, so they send you a $5,000 bill, right? So the real question is, what requires prior notice, and you know, or after the work's completed, now what? Can I do it and then bill you later, or do I need prior approval, right? And what about emergencies? So we need to make a long list of contract requirements, so when we start the job, we are real clear what's extra and what's not, what's change order, what's not, etc. So we create a notice chart of how many days notice it requires for all these kinds of things: change condition, scope, delays, requests for change orders, etc., etc. Value engineering, work plans. If you're doing a public works job, they want to schedule, how often they want to schedule update, when they want your submittals, all those kinds of things. So this is all stuff that I've been in court many times as an expert with clients, and it's a dispute between the supplier and the subcontractor and the general contractor, and the job's delayed, and there's $1 million on the table we're arguing about because some of this stuff didn't get submitted on time, they were late. Nobody really knew what the terms were or what the requirements were. And obviously the architect had no clue either. That's pretty normal, right? Okay, so let's keep going. So then we want to follow the contract. So what does the contract say? So we go through that long list of contract notices and requirements so we can manage the contract. And I call it win. To win, I got to write it now. Do paperwork now. Your bid is thrown in the trash, you have a contract. Your bid is a license to go fishing. What'd you hook? You hooked the contract. So the contract's all that matters, and it talks about changes in notice and documentation and billings. And I've got another slogan. Late means never. In. No notice, no nothing. If I didn't provide notice, late means never. If it's not in writing, it never happened. So I gotta beat on my project managers and my superintendents and my foremen that it must be in writing. And we don't want to tick off our customer, and we'll cover that in just a minute. But I got to be firm, and I got to tell you, as a GC, the subcontractors that were firm and follow the contract, I respect them. The ones that didn't follow the contract, I walk all over them. I get them to do stuff for free, and I push them hard, and they get paid slow. The ones that are firm, I was going to use the word nasty, they're just firm. They're following their contract. Guess what? I respect them. I sign their contract because I know they ain't going to do any work unless I sign their change order request or whatever the issue is, right? So what's the golden rule of construction, right? Well, he who has the gold rules, right? No, not necessarily. It's what's in the contract. So if the GC, hey, if you don't do this work for me, we're never going to use you again, or we're not going to screw you, or we're not going to pay you. Hey, what's in the contract? So we want to have a relationship with our customer, but we don't want to work for people who abuse us, right? So in a good market, it's not worth it. It's not worth it, right? Anyway, so know your customers, right? I mean, the first thing I would ask to a general contractor is this negotiated contract, open book contract? Do you have a guaranteed max? Is it construction management? Is there a fixed fee? Is there a savings clause? There's a million questions of just what kind of contract does a general contractor have. So if you understand that, then you know how to manage your relationship with your general contractor. Because if it's an open book GMAX contract with a savings clause, it doesn't really hurt me that much to give you money. But if it's a lump sum fixed amount contract, then I don't want to deal with change orders. So there's a different way to run this communication train, and so we have to really understand what the contract's all about. So follow the contract. No wimps. What's the contract say? Let's follow the contract. Let's not be wimpy. Let's be firm but fair. And how do we do that? We train our customers. So before the job starts, we have to walk through all the things we've discussed so far: the notice requirements, the markups, is verbal okay or not okay, etc. Who's authorized to sign? What's our rates? What's our markups? What if we don't get paid? All those, are you going to accelerate us at the end and we get more money for that? What if it rains? What do we do? So let's address that before we start the job. And so we want to have a pre-construction startup meeting. So me as an electrical contractor, I'm actually a general, but you know, I would like to meet with my major subcontractors. Electrical is about as major as it comes. You know, concrete, maybe steel, maybe a masonry on a masonry building, but electrical and mechanical, I mean, those are the biggies. Maybe fire sprinklers and plumbing, and that's about it. But maybe framing on a wood frame structure. But you know, the structural contractors and the electrical, I mean, to me, that's the biggies. I want to meet with my subcontractors before I start the job. And so we want to start the job right. We want to train, the goal is to train them how we're going to do business together and what we've included. So the agenda is to train our customers. In order to do that, we've got to ask them to meet with us, hopefully before you sign the contract. But if you already signed the contract, then let's go out and meet with the project manager, the superintendent, the foreman, whoever they got out there, whoever's accountable and authorized to sign your change order requests. And let's meet with them. And let's review the project requirement. Let's go through the job. Let's walk through the scope, the price, the inclusions, exclusions. Let's make sure it's real clear what we have and what we don't have. I got to tell you, as a GC, my PM really doesn't know what the electrical's got and doesn't have until there's an issue. So let's take 10 minutes and review it with them. And then let's go through the schedule. What's your projected schedule? What long lead items do you have? What approvals do you need to order the long lead items? What's the timing for that? And what kind of crew size did you propose is in your bid? And because so they can't cram you down and add 20 guys at the last week. What's in your budget? So we're having a pre-construction, a clear understanding of what's expected meeting. What meetings are required, job rules. I got to park over here. You got to, you know, you can't park on the site. You got to bring your own power, whatever it is, logistics, where you can put a trailer, site layout, temporary facilities, utilities, who's providing all that, water for backfill, et cetera, where do you dump your trash, all those kinds of things. So we've got quality now. What about quality? Who's inspecting that? Safety, what's required? General conditions, move-in, mobilization, you know, storage yard, tests, cleanups, supervision, you know, what do you need? What do you require? What do you expect? Number 5, we're going to talk about the contract now. So we're going to open up the contract and we'll review it with our customer. We're going to walk through it. We're going to look at what's required for documentation, notice, communication, coordination. What's it say about all that? You know, we've already gone through that earlier in this webinar. And then we're going to talk about change orders. So when is it a change order? We didn't, you know, let's look at the clause. What does it say in the contract about change orders? What do we include? What do we not include? Let's look about documentation, notice, procedures, authorization, timing. What's our rates? Let's discuss our rates. Here's our standard labor rates. Here's our standard equipment rate. And here's our markup proposed. Is that okay? And then who's authorized? And can we do some T&M work if it's in a hurry? And then when do we get paid for all that? So let's have it. You're going to have that conversation. Let's just get it out of the way early so we're all on the same page. And you know what happens if you go over this early? In the middle of the job, the guy says, "Hey, can you do this right now, really quick?" You go, "Don't you remember that conversation? What do the contracts say?" It takes written authorization. So we got 2 choices: either approve it in writing, or what? Let's cross out the subcontract and change it to say we can bill you whenever we want if you verbally tell us. Well, they can't do that, so then you got them, right? The goal is to make it clear how we're going to work together. What about emergencies, unforeseen conditions? You need something real fast, something blows up over the weekend. What about changes, planned conflicts, issues, of course, delays, back charges, you know, how are we going to time extensions, claims, dispute? How are we going to handle all that? We get in a dispute, what are we going to do? Do you have an arbitration panel? Do we have a meeting? What are we going to do? We're going to proceed under protest? Because you know you're going to have it. So let's just discuss that up front. And then, of course, we can continue on talking about payment and all that kinds of things. Submittals and shop drawings, timing, who's authorized, how many days they have. You know, our switch gear is going to be 16 weeks. We got to get shop drawings, we got to get approved, then we got to order it, and we need it. Well, let's cover that. Whatever else is on your list. And then how are we going to do the closeout? What's required? So this becomes your startup meeting agenda. So to me, this avoids 90% of conflicts. by making a clear understanding of how we're going to work together and what we've got in our budget and how we bid the job. So it's real clear. This will avoid almost all problems. So the clients that I've done this with as a GC, we have had no issues. You know, I tell them right up front, you know, I know at the end of the job, you're gonna want us to give you an unconditional lien release, even though you haven't paid the retention. We're not gonna do that, you know, under the number 5, their payment. I said, we're not gonna do that. We're not gonna release our lien rights until we're paid. So I'm just warning you right now, in 9 months from now, we're gonna lien this job. I'm just telling you, because I know your bank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, whoever their lender is, they will not pay the retention without an unconditional release. So I'm just telling you, I've been through it with Wells Fargo before. They're going to require a complete unconditional lien release, even though you haven't paid us. We're not going to give it to you. I'm just warning you. Fast forward 9 months, the job meeting, I say, hey, client, guess what? We're billing you for retention, and we're not going to give you a release. I'm just warning you. We're going to lien the job in 28 days. We have 30 days, and just call up the bank, tell them what we're going to do, and then you know, we'll work it out. But we're not giving up our lien rights. So now we're not going to get in a big argument at the end of the job when you lien the job, where you send them a notice of default or whatever you're going to do, right? So think about how you can be more proactive with your customer. And to avoid change order issues. Okay, so part of this conversation at the startup meeting, or when you sign a contract, is talk about change orders. And you've all seen this cartoon or this picture, right? So first thing we have to establish is what costs are allowed. Now, what change order costs are allowed? Now, me being a general contractor, I know that my general contract does not allow me to charge the cost of the work in the change order or in a cost plus job with a guaranteed max, does not allow me to charge for anybody stationed at the headquarters. It says it right in the contract. I cannot charge for estimator, project manager, superintendent who's not stationed at this job. I can't charge for a safety training because it happens at the headquarters. And so there's a lot of things that I see subcontractors ask for that I can't get as a GC. And if I can't get it, I can't give it to you because my customer won't approve it. So you've got to understand what costs are allowed. So I just spent a few days with an electrical contractor reviewing their change order worksheet, and they had safety on there, and they had superintendent and project manager and bookkeeper and estimator and all sorts of things. And, you know, they kept getting rejected. And I said, well, you know, they can't approve them because they can't get them for their own company. So anyway, so let's, you know, we need to know, can I get supervision? Can I get project management? What about accounting? What about general conditions? Trailers, water, security, small tools, temporary protection, cleanup. What about trucks, equipment, tools? At what rates? What about overtime? What about all those kinds of things? What about, can I bill you for bonds and insurance? So we're trying to clearly establish how we're going to move forward on this job. And what's our markup over and in profit? What rates are you allowed to give us? You know, some contracts will say 10%, 15%, 20%. So what are we allowed to charge? And then what about time? Are we entitled to time or not entitled? Or can we ask for general conditions? Or so we have to clear that up. Then we make a, you know, then you propose, here's a good change order, you like that one? Then we propose our rates. Now notice in the rate, like, so this is what I see from a subcontractor. They want to charge for project management, superintendent, estimator, bookkeeper, foreman, worker, etc. Well, I can't allow them to do that. So what I would recommend, now this is a little bit off the record, I'm helping subcontractors here, not helping the owner. You know, you need to include all of, you'll never get that approved. Project manager, project superintendent, estimator, bookkeeper, you're not going to get that approved. So let's just transfer all those costs to the crew rates. So I like to call it a crew working foreman. Some people even buck you on a foreman, But if it's a working foreman, you know, the guy's working. I got to pay for it. So not a guy sitting in his truck, you know, eating lunch and doing paperwork. So I call it crew working foreman and crew worker, and I don't break it out by apprentice and whatever, just an average rate. So on the rates column, the black ink column, you know, a crew foreman 65, but I'm going to try to get a little time for PM and superintendent and estimator. Well, I'm not going to get it approved. It's not billable. So I need to pad my working foreman rate and my worker rate to include the money I'm losing because I'm going to charge for the supervision and project management and estimating, right? So, I mean, obviously you got to sell the rates, but I got the red column. I call it the simple rate column, which is real simple. I can get those rates approved as a GC with my client. I can't get the black ink column that says rate. I can't get that column approved. It's not going to happen. So I try to figure out what the burden is for my project manager, my superintendent, my estimator for a change order, and you know, it's 5%, 7%, 8%, whatever it is. One other thing you got to look at is way down at the bottom under markup. You've got, you know, you want to charge 15 overhead and 10% profit. Your overhead might be 15%, and you want to get, you know, make 10% profit. But the general contract only allows for 15% total. So, you know, we're losing basically 10%, 15 and 10 versus 15. So we need to pad our hourly rates accordingly as well. So, you know, I recommend you just pad your hourly rates to cover your lost overhead and your lost profit and your lost project manager, superintendent, estimator, bookkeeper. And so, you know, whether it's 65 to 75 or 65 to 77, or, you know, everybody's different depending on what part of the country you're from and how much you have to pay your crews. But, you know, I want to be able to get my change orders approved quickly and simply. And I got to tell you, as a GC and a construction manager, I rarely question the subcontractors' rates, rarely, unless they're stupid high. I know you're paying the guy $20 and you're charging 75. I know that's probably a little bit aggressive, but for electrician, you know, I mean, let's be real here. I mean, they're not cheap, so I don't know what the pay rate is, unless I'm union, and then of course it's obvious everybody's got the same rates. But for an open shop contractor, you know, I'd approve $50 to $80. I got no problem. You know, it's what it is. And I'm not going to argue much if it's in that realm, but if it's 110, then I might argue. But if you can prove it, great. One other thing to think about is what about your overtime? Is your overtime blended in there? You know, if you have the crew work 50 hours a week, you know, you got an extra $7 an hour just for that, or $3 an hour. So think about how you present your T&M rates or your change order rates. So at the meeting, the change order meeting, the startup meeting, you're going to here we go. At the startup meeting, you're gonna review the rates. You're gonna give them your rate sheet. I actually would add the rate sheet to your subcontract, staple it to it, and send it back in. So it's real clear at the beginning of the job. Here's our rates for any extra work. That way we don't argue. I'd rather not argue later. I'd rather just get it over now. All the stuff we're going to talk about, let's just get it over, right? So anyway, so now we're under construction and we've got a problem. Now what we do? We've got to document it. So we're out there on the job and somebody says you need to add some plugs in the slab, or you need to add some rebar. I got a rebar example here, but somebody says I need you to sleeve some slab outlets or whatever, you know, I got to put some conduit in or whatever you need to do. It's an afterthought. Hurry up. So, you know, in this example, I'm saying added slab, you can call it added conduit. And so I'm going to take a picture. I'm going to take several pictures. I'm going to put an arrow on it, and I'm going to staple the detail, or page 2 of the request. I'm going to have a detail showing the added work that's required. And I'm going to type up a memo, and you can do this right on your tablet out on the job if you got it all set up. It's an approval memo. This is to confirm the field change additional work item authorized. So how you know, basically, we hereby authorize XYZ Electrical Company to move forward with the following additional work item. That's really what this is. It's an agreement to tell me to move forward, and we'll figure out the money later. So you can either give them a price, or you can say, hey, here's what we're going to do. You hereby have authorized us to add some work per the detail number, based on the terms and pre-approved rate. Customer hereby authorizes us, subcontractor, contractor, to proceed with the additional work not included in the contract, and agrees to increase the contract price and completion date based on actual costs incurred to perform this added work. We'll proceed and submit a request for change order within 14 days, 7 days, 5 days after completion for approval and payment. See the photo and details. So additional cost per rates within 7 days, additional time, 4 extra days. We're not asking for money, we're just saying it adds 4 extra days. So when they squeeze you at the end, you can say, hey man, look at all these extra times. So we get them to sign it. And if they won't sign it, they won't tell me to move forward, I'm not going to take the risk. Why should I take the risk if they're not willing to take the risk to approve me to move forward? So I'm pretty firm. Back to that startup meeting. Hey, don't you remember? We can't do anything without an approval. Remember the contract? Yeah. So you need to tell us to move forward, or else we're not going to do it. We're not going to take the risk because you are too wimpy to approve us to move forward. If your customer, if the owner won't accept the risk, you won't accept the risk, we're not going to accept the risk. We're not in the risk management business. We're in the electrical make money business. So you've got to get an approval authorization, even per the terms of the contract, and you're going to give them your rate sheet. What else is there? It's pretty simple, right? So in conclusion, we want to cover our what with a change order. We want to remember, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. We need to document now, and we need to remember no verbal agreements, no VAs. If in writing, if it's not in writing, it never happened. And when? Write it now, right? Write it now. So what are we going to do when we get home and we get back to work and we go? Somebody asks you to do a bunch of freebies, right? We got to win the game, right? Win the game. Changes are allowed. You have to move forward if requested, unless you're in a dispute. And so you can fight and give them a play hardball, turn in a high price and fight, which delays everything. You're never going to get it approved. Or you can play price ping pong, go in at 20 grand, come back at 10, 20, 15, 17, 13, but like I said earlier, give me a fair price. Let's just proactively meet and agree. Let's get it over with. Faster is better. Faster is better. I just want to get this thing. I want to keep this thing moving. I got 2 clients right now that got a $500,000 and $1 million dispute because of nobody sat down and would agree. Let's just get it over with, right? And another rule is 2 heads are better than 1. 2 heads are better than 1. You like that? So if in doubt, talk to somebody else in your office, get a second opinion. You get all emotional, but if I go talk to another PM in my office or another estimator, I go, what do you think's fair? What do you think we ought to settle at? Then you can go into the meeting with a little more level head and get those change orders approved now. That's the key. So act fast, but don't act alone. It's free or extra, price high or low. What should we include? What's fair? Be firm or easy, fight or give in. What's best for your company? Go to court, stop the job, or lose a customer, or work it out. Work it out. Obviously, we want to solve the problems at the lowest level. At the project manager's level is a lot better at the VP level or the owner level, right? Then we're into heated dispute. So let's just get it settled early, and even if you don't make all your money, it's better than not enough, right? All right. So closing out, 2 heads are better than 1. How do we win these disputes? Number 1, you want to maintain leverage. If you clearly understand the contract says, when you have the right and when you don't have it. Document like a movie script. You want to make sure the judge is going to understand it, and the judge has no clue about what's going on in your job. So when you document, make it simple, make it clear. In 6 months to a year from now, somebody else can read it and clearly understand. Notify and protest fast. No notice, no nothing. Quantify the damages or the costs clearly. What plan, what sheet, what's in the contract, what's not in the contract, details, photos, authorizations, etc. Even voicemails or emails. And keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid, right? Make it easy to understand. Don't be a pig. Don't be bold and stupid. Pigs get slaughtered. Let's try to agree in the middle. Let's get this thing done, and by settling fast, okay? If you don't settle fast, you're going to make the lawyer rich. It's 30 to 50 grand to go to court. I mean, let's not argue over a $3,000 change order. It costs you 50 grand to go to court over it, right? Let's get it over with. Okay, we're a little bit over on our time. Any questions? I haven't seen we had too many questions yet, and then we'll close out. Anybody have a question or two? Okay. All right. So if I can help you, give me a call. You got my email on the screen there. GH@Hardhat Presentations. I've got some coaching services. I help you one-on-one, and we'll go over your P&L and your budgets and help you build a management team. And I have some coaching groups, and I also have an online school of 20 hours of classes. If you're interested, Hardhat special, 33% off. You get a discount on there, hardhatbizschool.com. And I'll turn it back to IEC. Hopefully I'll see you guys at the conference in a few months. And if you're interested in, I've got a book called Project Management for Contractors. If you're interested in it, send me an email and I will send it back to you. It's a little ebook. I don't know, I think it's 20, 30 pages, and hopefully it'll help you out with some ideas, all right? So just send me an email and put on the subject line IEC change orders, and I will forward you the free ebook. Okay, turn it back to IEC. Thanks for allowing me to be here today, and look me up in a few months over in Phoenix.
All right, thank you, George. That was some great information you shared with our attendees today. This will conclude today's webinar. Please don't forget to take our quick 3-question survey that we will email out to you. Also, make your plans to register for our next webinar titled Worksite Wellness, Just a Step Away, which will be on August 30th. You can view a full list of upcoming webinars on our IEC's website. Thank you again for attending.